Welcome one and all to the first ever alternative commencement ceremony at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Welcome UNC faculty, staff, students, family members, and this most of all, welcome to the class of 2012. My name is Alana Davis, and I am one of the student organizers who has been committed over the past 6 months to the creation of today's event. A big thank you to my fellow organizers, our supporters, and even to our haters for helping keep our fires burning during the planning process. I would also like to take a moment to thank all the mothers, both here with us and elsewhere, as today is indeed Mother's Day. Now, we will pause again in the course of the hours ahead to congratulate all in the class of 2012. I believe that the graduates who have chosen to be with us here today truly embody the UNC principles of Lux and Libertas, light and liberty, and the intellectual curiosity and engagement with life and learning. The students represented here today are inspiring. We see a global need to take collective action to shape our world, rather than wait for those in positions of political economic power to shape our vision for us. We are honored today to have a number of distinguished speakers and performers who join us in solidarity with the Occupy movement and with all movements for social, economic, and environmental justice. Throughout the ceremony, I invite you all to join this conversation. The form of horizontal social democracy that the Occupy movement has employed throughout General Assemblies and working group meetings offers some non-disruptive hand gestures to add to this conversation. Twinkles up implies approval or support for what's being said. Conversely, twinkles down imply dissent, and twinkles in the middle means that you're more or less on the fence. I would also like to take a moment to explain staff, which we're going to be having after the speakers of the ceremony. We'll have a list that that Carrie has right there. That's Carrie. And you feel free to add your name to that list after our recognized guests have much to share with us. The event was created with the desire to facilitate an opportunity to exchange ideas and possibilities for our future. We have 30 minutes planned for stack afterwards, and if you feel like you have something you want to share with the group, I implore you to do so. Our first speaker reached out to us just over a week ago. A Chapel Hill native, Mr. Haywood Carey, was coming into town this weekend to visit family and wanted to see if there was anything he could do to help. Currently a self-titled rabble-rouser working with the Occupy Wall Street Accounting Working Group, Mr. Carey formerly worked with Change to Win, partnering with labor unions and other like-minded groups to help build an effective and sustainable progressive infrastructure here in North Carolina. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from our resident Occupy activists. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Carey to the stage.
Hey. So, good morning, brothers and sisters, and welcome to the University at Chapel Hill's Alternative Commencement 2012. So, I loved that introduction to Occupy Wall Street and our many and varied and sometimes strange hand gestures. It was pretty cohesive, but I want to introduce one more to you. It's actually a recent addition that we've added. And we have this one thing called a point of information, where we have something you want to add, but we also have something called a point of affection. So I was hoping that you guys could join with me to offer up points of affection to everyone who has put so much time and so much work into making this event a success. Oh, that's so sweet. My name is William Haywood Carey, and I'm with Occupy Wall Street. I grew up here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. My parents lived just down the road off of Rosemary Street. Hi, Mom and Dad, and happy Mother's Day, Mom. I've been involved in activism here locally, across the state, and around the country since I was a teenager. My activist road was a traditional one, getting involved in Democratic Party politics and working on campaigns, organizing with labor unions and for grassroots advocacy efforts. From the start of the occupation on Wall Street, it was clear to me that something special was happening in Zuccotti Park, and that I had to be a part of it. So I packed my bags, half knowing that I probably wouldn't be returning to North Carolina. I hitched a ride up to New York, knowing almost no one, with no plan at all, except to try and make the world a better place in my own little way. Like a lot of people, I came to Occupy Wall Street as a kind of penance. Unfortunately or fortunately, I had become disillusioned with electoral politics and campaigns. This happened in 2010, shortly after my time working on the healthcare and financial reform efforts. After close to a decade in the industry of politics, I came to understand that it was exactly that, an industry designed to support itself and maintain the status quo which provides for its very existence. Through campaigns, interest groups, labor unions, I'd become part of the 2 or 4 year charade that I found cons men and women into thinking that citizenship is simply pulling a lever in a booth, a system that holds people back from taking autonomy over their own lives. I'd become part of the problem that I sought to remedy in my life's work, becoming a gatekeeper to power rather than an organizer. So trying to figure out just exactly what I had spent 10 years of my life and all the hair on my head doing prompted an almost existential crisis with me. And it took Occupy Wall Street for me to remember who I was and why I was what I was, and that is an activist. Some of us at OWS are experienced activists. Some of us are self-described revolutionaries. Some of us are rich. A few of us are famous. But by far, most of us involved with Occupy at Wall Street and across the country are just ordinary men and women. Ordinary people did all these remarkable things that history will show Occupy has accomplished. That we are so ordinary is, I believe, what is so important. One can debate the tactics of the Occupy movement or its accomplishments all day. But one thing is certain. Occupy has not just transformed the national debate, but transformed the method of debate. Occupy showed millions of people that they don't need to wait until Obama's campaign manager says go to get involved. That there is more to being a citizen than just voting and watching the news. And more importantly, that anyone can do it. I don't have a great response for what Occupy will look like post-occupation or into the future. Occupy Wall Street came about as a result of several efforts, melding into one, and is currently morphing into several new efforts. From what I hear, similar restructurings are happening across the country. We went through a tough winter, especially in New York, full of infighting and existential paralysis, something that I'm told is apparently not unique among the left. But spring has finally come, and despite all of the illegal evictions of the physical occupations across the country, Occupy remains strong and grows every day. In hundreds of cities across the country this May Day, we mark the beginning of a spring awakening for occupiers and allies. More than 30,000 people hit the streets for May Day in New York. And just yesterday, hundreds of thousands of indignados gathered across Spain to mark the 1-year anniversary of their movement against austerity that we at Occupy drew so much inspiration from. I had originally written some remarks for this event, full of fury at the fascist giving his speech right now a mile down the road. But late last night, actually at the advice of my mother and wonderful girlfriend, I decided to cut out all of the vitriol and all of the overwhelming evidence showing how Mike Bloomberg's honorary doctorate of laws isn't worth the paper it's printed on. We all know that. We all know the evidence, or else we wouldn't be here today. Those words I wrote initially for this event, I think came out of hate and fear of Mike Bloomberg. Emotions that I'm ashamed of having towards that man. But emotions that are hard to avoid. After all that Mike Bloomberg has done to me and my friends in this movement that I've given my life for, in New York, we live under constant police surveillance and harassment, all at Mike Bloomberg's behest. You know, the arrests and beatings and harassment, it can get to you. And it did get to me. And I didn't really realize until now when I saw all of you coming out this morning. Many of you giving up such an important moment in your lives, graduation, to stand up for justice. And in solidarity with us in New York City. I see it now. I see that the hate and the fear of a tiny tyrannical executive is nothing. Nothing compared to the love and the solidarity and the righteousness that is right here in Chapel Hill, 500 miles from Wall Street. A few activists at UNC stood up and said enough is enough when they learned of Mike Bloomberg's commencement. A few more joined with them, and they came together to organize, to bring us all here today. And so long as we live in a world where activists stand up for what they believe in and stand with each other, then there is a lot of hope for us yet. I'm honored and proud to be here today, to see people stand up to a corrupt mayor and come together, celebrating their vision of a better world in solidarity with one another and with my brothers and sisters in New York. It's inspiring. And to have this in my hometown is phenomenal. It has inspired and rejuvenated me personally. And I gotta tell you, it has impressed the hell out of every activist I know in New York City that I've shared this event with. All of whom expressed their deepest appreciation and camaraderie. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for doing this. Welcome to the alternative commencement. Welcome to the rest of your lives. What a great way to kick it off. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Everyone, and means so much because none of us would be here without all the parents and especially the mothers. And so for y'all to come out and make us who we are, and we wouldn't be who we are and doing what we're doing without all of your support. So we love y'all so much. Thank y'all very much. So one of the primary motivations for organizing this commencement was that we felt that Bloomberg, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, doesn't necessarily represent the values that we feel like we should be celebrating in society. So instead of continuing to celebrate and honor those members of society whose success is measured by the accumulation of wealth and of influence, we felt like we should honor those who are living their convictions to bring about a better world. And our next speaker, Kathy Kelly, is one of those people worthy of honoring. She's someone who offers inspiration and insights to those of us who are graduating, who are not content with the world as it is. And her commitment to nonviolence and the dedication and sacrifice that she has made to work toward peace and justice around the world should not only inspire us all, but to force us to reflect critically on just how much we are willing to sacrifice for our commitments. The projects which she has been involved in are too numerous to list, but for a brief rundown, she travels regularly to Afghanistan to document the effects of decades of war with a campaign that she coordinates called Voices for Creative Nonviolence. And in 2011, she was a passenger on the boat, the Audacity of Hope, as part of the U.S. Boat to Gaza project. And she's always willing to risk her comfort and safety. She lived in Gaza during Operation Cast-Lead bombing in 2009. She lived in Baghdad during the 2003 shock and awe bombing, and in the 1998 Desert Fox bombing, as well as during the 1991 Gulf War. It is her bravery and resolute commitment to peace and justice which we hope to celebrate today. A phrase that Kathy sometimes uses to explain some of the forces behind her activism is that we catch courage from one another. Anyone who's been involved in activism understands this statement, because we are stronger when we support each other, and we are stronger because of each other, and we are the source of each other's courage. So please join me in welcoming Kathy Kelly so we can hopefully catch just a little bit of her courage.
Well, no place I would rather be.
Yeah.
Graduates of the University of North Carolina, your parents, your family members, your friends, and the wider community, it is with great happiness and encouragement that I participate in this ceremony. Thank you very, very much. And in the spirit of what's been said before, thank you for that introduction, and also to Charles. I want to say that I decided to kind of try to push myself a little bit beyond where I normally study or look for ideas and thoughts in speaking. And so I'm going to bring into this gathering remarks of 3 presidents of the United States. And first I'd like to quote Woodrow Wilson. It's the first time I've ever quoted Woodrow Wilson. But he once said that, and forgive the sexist language, we have to change this in our minds. What he said was that every man that is sent forth from a university must become not only a person of his nation, but also a person of his time. Every person sent forth from a university, he or she must be not only a person of the nation, but also a person of the time. Well, in honesty, being a person of our nation today is really pretty challenging because we are the country that has developed, sold, stored, and used more weapons of mass destruction than any other country on earth. We have a larger arsenal, greater weapons spending than the next 18 countries combined. Over half of the weapons and weapon systems bought in all the world are bought by the United States. And this has tremendous implication in terms of the jobs that are available for people. And I also want to quote President Dwight Eisenhower 3 days before he left office. He gave a warning that we really must heed. He warned people about the military-industrial complex. He warned people about unwarranted influence of the military-industrial complex on American foreign policy. And this is a warning that's very, very important for our time, because so much of, as I say, the jobs in our country in a time of shrinking jobs being available are dominated by either the military or increasingly what we could refer to as the prison industrial complex. And this poses for the graduates of universities all across the United States and really all around the world a very challenging time. So to be a person of our nation, but also to be a person of our nation, means to be a person who has inherited the wealth and the goodness of the abolition movement, of the union movement, of the women's movement, of the civil rights movement. You know, I've been in those war zones that were mentioned earlier, and in every single place people could sing in their own language and in our language all the verses to the civil rights anthem, "We Shall Overcome." And to be a person of our time is really remarkably exciting because of this Occupy movement, which in 12 weeks, such a short time, has globalized the logo 99 and 1 and amplified in incalculable ways a sense of solidarity. And so these graduates go forth with particular sensitivity to that solidarity, and we wish you well. We commend all the University of North Carolina graduates for the hard work needed to accomplish graduation, but to you especially. I want to give the words that are the last lines of a novel, Kite Runner, and it's a novel that was written about Afghanistan. And I'll say more about it, but the main character is one who struggles and grapples with betrayal of a very particularly heroic young friend. And the young friend says, "For you 1,000 times over." Graduates assembled here today, for you 1,000 times over. Dwight Eisenhower also said in his farewell address to the U.S. public that it's important to have a table to which everyone can come. Now, he's talking about foreign policy, and he speaks about the table welcoming even the weakest. Now, quite honestly, I can't say weakest when I'm thinking about people in Afghanistan. I've encountered incredible strength there. And likewise, while under bombing in Iraq, the strength of people enduring, trying to protect their children is inestimable. But I like that idea of the egalitarian, inviting others to the table. And so I want to tell you a couple stories of who has sort of come to that table in my life, whose voices, I think, can be well represented here today. I had a chance when in Pakistan to talk to a man who had taken 2 buses and walked a long, long distance in order to talk to us about his experiences in the village of Khaisor after they'd been hit by drone attacks. And he described the impact of the drones and how hard it was to try to carry rescuers over an area where there weren't even any roads. It's just a village of 500 people. And to try to flag down cars who would get the survivors to a hospital, but the drivers themselves were too afraid to stop because maybe they'd be hit by the next drone. And after he described this nightmarish experience, I asked him, do you think that, suppose people from the United States ever came to your village, to this village you've just described, would people in your village ever sit down and talk with us about peacemaking? And he looked at me like I was off my rocker. And he said, Madame Kathy, who would be so crazy as to not to want the peace? Who would be so crazy as to not to want the peace? And I also want to tell you about how we ever first encountered Afghan peace volunteers. A number of us were doing a fast in Washington, D.C., as a way to accompany people trapped in Guantanamo and other black sites around the world where people are subjected to indefinite detention and torture. And so we learned that a group of teenagers in the central highlands of Afghanistan, in a town called Bamyan, were fasting with us. Now, it was freezing cold over there, and they were out in a tent, and their elders were full of askance about what in the world they were doing, but they had determined to conduct this fast with us, and so we managed to have a Skype phone call with them. And over the Skype call, one of our friends from New York thought, well, shouldn't we tell these kids about Martin Luther King, because it happened to be Martin Luther King's birthday. And so he was beginning to explain to them about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And from the other end, these kids are huddled around a cell phone, there was a commotion, and it was the kids trying to decide which one of them would deliver to us over the phone one of their memorized quotes from the speeches of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I thought, ooh, I want to meet these youngsters. The other president that I'd like to quote is President John F. Kennedy. He gave a speech at American University. It was a commencement speech in June of 1963. And it was in that speech that he said he was going to work toward creating peace by declaring that the United States would no longer engage in nuclear testing. And you know, there had been an exchange of 28-page handwritten letters between him and Khrushchev. So it sort of indicated what might have been had we not decided after the Soviet Union dismantled to instead keep on promoting a kind of a Cold War threat with missile systems. But this is what John F. Kennedy said. He was speaking of the Soviet Union. For we are both devoting massive sums of money to weapons that could be better devoted to combat ignorance, poverty, and disease. We are both caught up in a vicious and dangerous cycle with suspicion on one side breeding suspicion on the other. So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. Help make the world safe for diversity. I was recently outside of the White Man Air Force Base, and we, wanting to help make the world safe for diversity, were protesting the usage of drone warfare. The drones are now being flown from many different bases, including White Man Air Force Base in Kansas. And meeting us, and we were a group of people really very similar in age and difference to our group right here. And meeting us were soldiers in full riot gear with plastic shields and batons and helmets and rifles. And they did this kind of choreographed 1, 2, 3, 4 step. And it looked as though the scene could turn very quickly into something of considerable violence. And I was the one who was at the microphone. And I don't quite know what came over me, but something kicked me back into childhood years of singing the Gregorian chant and remembrance of how the Afghan youth peace volunteers have repeatedly used those last lines from the book Kite Runner, and I began singing to these well-armed military forces, "For you 1,000 times over, for you 1,000 times over, for you 1,000 times over, for you 1,000 times over." And so to the graduates assembled here today, be assured that we are all feeling deep in our hearts, full of appreciation, full of admiration for you 1,000 times over. May your lives be blessed with love, with simple living, with sharing of resources, with a deep belief that nonviolence can change the world, and with an abiding commitment never to let inconvenience or risk get in the way of living your lives in accord with what you most deeply believe.
In our world today, to just do that, and we are so honored to be able to. We're wearing these robes because we are faculty, but we learn with you all the time, and this has been just a really beautiful event. And part of why I couldn't come up because I was just so moved. I couldn't get my voice out. So thank you so much, and we are really, 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 I don't want to say proud of you, but kind of, yeah. We just want to say we're really proud of you, and we hope that more students get empowered and inspired by this kind of practice. Thank you.
Thanks so much to the parents as well, and the families and the relatives who've been here in support of these wonderful students that we have over the years here. And thanks to our fellow faculty, where maybe not very many, but wonderful people as well. And thanks everybody, and for the speakers as well for these inspiring speeches. That was really wonderful.
I would just say that as people are probably finishing listening to Mayor Michael Bloomberg, they know the real commencement they missed.
Yeah. I'm really glad that the students took the time to organize this for all the reasons that have already been said. I think it's really important for there to be alternative voices today, and especially for young people who are thinking about what they're going to do and how they're going to shape their lives. It's a hard thing to figure out, and we need these kinds of spaces. So thank you very much.